Thank you, Mr. Chair, for organizing today's hearing on protecting freedom of speech at the place where it's most vital, our institutions of higher learning. This really should not be a partisan issue in any way, shape, or form. If there's one thing that shouldn't be a partisan issue, it should be this. We should fight about everything else, exercising our First Amendment rights. But freedom of speech itself is foundational to the character of our country. And indeed, in just a few years ago, 2017, in the California legislature, I authored a resolution affirming freedom of speech as a foundational campus value. The resolution encouraged universities across the state to adopt the gold standard free speech statement, which is the University of Chicago Statement of Free Expression. Now, this is a Democrat supermajority in California, and it passed our legislature unanimously. This was just in 2017. In 2016, President Barack Obama had this to say. He said, "There's been a trend around the country of trying to get colleges to disinvite speakers with a different point of view or disrupt a politician's rally. Don't do that," Obama said, "no matter how ridiculous or offensive you might find the things that come out of their mouths. There will be times when you shouldn't compromise your core values, your integrity, and you will have the responsibility to speak up in the face of injustice. But listen, engage. If the other side has a point, learn from them. If they're wrong, rebut them, teach them, beat them on the battlefield of ideas." And yet, a few years later, we continue to see incidents like we saw, well, just recently in California at UC Davis and at your university, Mr. Joyner, Stanford. And I understand you're the executive editor of the Stanford Review, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And I understand your publication has done some great work covering the attacks on free speech that have happened on campus.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So what I want to ask you is about what the mentality you think is of the students who created these disruptions. Because these are Stanford law students, presumably very bright, and yet we saw them so flagrantly defying the admonition from former President Obama, and not even letting someone of opposing viewpoints speak. They seem to think that stopping the words from being expressed was the proper response to their disagreement. So how do you think it is that some of the brightest students we have in this country don't seem to understand this basic American value?
Absolutely. It's quite concerning. So thank you for the question, Congressman. Stanford Law School, I believe, is currently the second-ranked law school in the country. We know that these students will go on to be, the next business leaders, sitting in these very chairs one day, and even at the Supreme Court. I mean, these are the students that Stanford Law is graduating. But these students, and this was over 100 student protesters here, completely disrupted Judge Duncan's speech. And if you watch the video and read the details in my article or other articles, they're holding obscene signs, heckling obscene remarks that I wouldn't even state here in this setting. And so I don't know what has brought these students to take on this worldview that believes they can just shut down someone else's speech because they disagree with them or have said something controversial. And so I've said we need university administrators in place to enforce it, and we absolutely do. But we need them to educate these students on these principles, and we need these students to uphold these principles of free speech themselves. And maybe that starts early on. It should happen in college, but maybe it needs to be something that's done and is not being well done in early education.
I think you're exactly right. I think that it starts at the primary, secondary school level. We need to get back to teaching civics in a real way. But one thing I did find encouraging in the dean of your university's response, Jenny Martinez, is she said that they're going to, one step the law school will take will be holding a mandatory half-day session for all students on the topic of freedom of speech and the norms of the legal profession. I think that this is a good idea. Now, it's not going to compensate for the shortcomings we see at our at the secondary and primary level around the country. But I think that the more universities that can do something like this, not necessarily in response to incidents that occur on campus, but just as a matter of your basic training, your basic orientation when you come to school, I think that that'd be something of great value. And Mr. Chair, I think that'd be perhaps something that we could look at as a committee as to how we can encourage that sort of education about the importance of the First Amendment and free speech at our universities. Thank you, and I yield back.